Oh boy, does time change things. But my thoughts on Uncharted 4: A Thief's End is not one of those things I expected to change so drastically. If you asked me about this game a few years ago, I probably would have told you that this is an amazing game and that Naughty Dog is a great game developer. But when news about the Uncharted movie started to surface, I realized that I didn't remember much about Uncharted 4. The only thing I kind of remembered was that it was about Nathan Drake and his brother hunting down clues to find the treasure of Captain Avery, the ruthless pirate who stole millions in gold and jewels. I also remember the Scotland and Madagascar levels, and that was about all I could really remember. As a matter of fact, Uncharted 4 is actually the only game by Naughty Dog that I have played, so I decided to replay it in anticipation for the film that will be coming out soon. And oh boy, that was a mistake, because this game is nothing like I remember. In fact, I almost hate this game. The level of scripted events in this game are absurd, the development history of this game is just depressing, and I would honestly rather watch some Let's Play on YouTube than to play this game for myself. All of what I just said may have pissed some people off, but please just hang in there so I can explain myself. And yes, there will be spoilers for Uncharted 4 in this video. Even though this game is almost 6 years old, there still might be some people out there who will get mad at me for not warning them of spoilers. Anyways, back to the video. You see, the Uncharted games, and the developers who make these games, Naughty Dog, are known for their cinematic storytelling in video games, and for making players feel like action movie heroes. And you know what? It genuinely deserves the praise for those aspects. This is one of the most graphically impressive games on my PlayStation 4, and the cinematography and rendering of the super cinematic cutscenes are massively impressive. You can tell that a ton of work went into the motion capture, cinematography, lighting simulations, and rendering of these scenes. And that's about where my praise ends for this game, because of how they make the rest of the game a cinematic movie experience with an absurd amount of scripted events. If you don't know what a scripted event in a video game is, I'll try to explain as quickly as possible. You see, a scripted event is tripped when players reach certain invisible triggers. Once the player trips one of these triggers, there will often be a coded event that follows. These encounters can't really be changed because the event is buried and tied to the programming of the game. Take, for example, the time that Sam and Nate are breaking into the auction. Sam hands Nate the grappling hook, and when Nate tries to grapple onto an exposed plank of wood, he misses and has to try again. That there is a scripted event. No matter what the player tries to do, Nathan will always miss on his first attempt. There are a lot of these in Uncharted 4, like the times that characters will say something when you reach a certain area, and those handholds that break as you try to climb them over and over and over and over and over and over again. Now then, these scripted events aren't that bad. In fact, scripted events on their own aren't a bad thing. Every game needs some level of scripting in it, even the cream of the crop best games out there. However, Naughty Dog games take this idea of scripting and over-abuse it to no end. In Scotland, this one handhold is supposed to be dropped down from. However, if you are just one handhold too early, or you press the circle button a little too soon, the game will insta-kill you the second you hit the ground. You need to be at the very end of the handholds before you can drop down to the ground and take no fall damage. And there is no middle ground. And oh my goodness, that stupid cell puzzle in Panama is just ridiculous. At the start of the game, Nathan Drake is in a prison in Panama in order to follow a lead on Avery's treasure. The clue might be in a cell in the tallest tower of this ancient prison. When Nathan reaches the cell, he needs to solve a puzzle in order to find the clues he is looking for. However, actually getting the puzzle started might be the most difficult part of that process. Even though it is obvious that Nathan needs to fold the paper in half to complete this big, bold rectangle with symbols on the inside of it, Nathan will not fold the piece of paper until he finds this barely visible sun and moon symbol on the wall. It is only then that Nathan, and by extension the player, is allowed to solve this puzzle. Heck, the sun and moon symbol on the paper is less noticeable compared to the massively bold symbols on the back. Why is this puzzle so difficult to start? This isn't the only example of this. Uncharted 4 is saturated with scripted events like this, And if you deviate just a little bit, or take what should be an alternate pathway, the game will punish you for not doing as the developers wanted you to do. Because of this, my overall sense of immersion is taken away while playing, as well as my experience while playing the game. I no longer feel like some action hero during these sections of the game because these scripted moments take up most of the action and just carry you through the areas. And to be brutally honest, the scripted action pieces do the most ridiculous things with their levels. Why the heck is this rock that Nathan is climbing on behaving like this? Does gravity not matter anymore? The developers do this all throughout the game, from the first orphanage escape, to the scuba diving segment, to the auction, and while it isn't as bad in Scotland, it is still annoying. And then the game makes its way to Madagascar, where Nathan, Sam, and Sully need to climb up the side of a volcano to follow the trail that Captain Avery laid down. The game hops into their rented car and they take off towards the volcano, and wait a minute, this area is open and free to explore. No one is holding my hand here, and I can solve problems and puzzles without the game laying it out in obvious fashion. Plus, this area is just gorgeous, making me want to explore every nook and cranny, while still leading me forwards to the area that I need to go with subtle hints and visual indicators. The levels are laid out in a way that gives just enough verticality that it is three-dimensional and fun without giving me a headache over where every platform is. And the enemies are fun to fight too, with places to take cover, and my AI companions are helping me out. All of a sudden, this gunfight breaks out, and I need to take out all the goons with my own skills. All of a sudden, I feel like an action movie hero going on a grand adventure. What the heck is going on here? For the early part of the game, I was stuck in 100 scripted events and being dragged along this adventure. Now all of a sudden, I'm playing through an actually fun level with scripted events that are more than just tolerable, but enjoyable because of how sparse and contained they are. My experience of the Madagascar level is completely different from the levels before it. And even though I told myself I would need to speedrun this game to get the footage for my video, I can't help but explore and enjoy myself in this level. But then this open-ended area ends, and then there is the market and the following tower puzzle, which is still fun. But then all of a sudden, I'm taken out of my enjoyment of the area by an overly scripted fight that breaks out. And this stupid truck that always seems to have pinpoint accuracy and the ability to teleport around the area just to piss me off. Okay, what just happened there? That open area was so much fun to explore. It's almost like I was playing a different and better game for a second there. What the heck is going on here? Well, there is an explanation for what just happened, and it all has to do with one Neil Druckmann.
Boo! Please, boo harder!
You may know this guy from the disastrous reception surrounding The Last of Us Part 2, which is just a whole other mess in and of itself. Now then, I had heard that Neil Druckmann had taken over and done a lot of work on Uncharted 4, but it wasn't until I did some research for this video that I realized just how bad the development of this game was because of Neil Druckmann. You see, the first 3 Uncharted games were directed by this person, Amy Hennig. With her experience on the previous Uncharted games, Amy Hennig, along with Justin Richmond, started developing Uncharted 4 from 2011 to 2014. Amy Hennig and Justin Richmond had a lot of interesting ideas planned for this next game. Stuff like the idea of connecting the story and gameplay more closely, since the sarcastic adventurer could kill hundreds of enemies on his adventure without blinking an eye. So they had the idea that Nathan wouldn't pick up a gun until halfway into the story. They were also playing around with ideas like the grappling hook and vehicular traversal in environments. But they also had a lot of cool ideas they were playing around with when it came to the story. Apparently, the original plan was to have Nathan's brother, Sam, be one of the main antagonists for most of the story. In this version of the story, Sam would hold a grudge against Nathan for leaving Sam for all those years in that prison in Panama. But as the story progressed, Nathan and Sam would mend their relationship and then go after the real antagonist of the story, Rafe, who in this version was one of the prisoners Sam spent time with. Those are some honestly pretty interesting ideas for Uncharted 4 that could have made for an interesting game, but sadly that would never happen. In 2014, Amy Hennig would leave Naughty Dog, and then Justin Richmond would then follow soon afterwards, along with a couple of other staff. So what the heck happened? There are some claims that Amy Hennig and her team were restricted since a lot of the company's focus was completing the DLC for The Last of Us Left Behind. There were other claims that Amy Hennig and her team didn't have a cohesive creative vision while they were developing this new game, probably because they were working with reduced resources due to The Last of Us DLC. But then there was the whole deal with Neil Druckmann. Some former Naughty Dog employees spilled the beans that Neil Druckmann and Amy Hennig had massive disagreements about where they would take the Uncharted series. And a little while later, Amy Hennig would leave Naughty Dog. But before Amy Hennig left, she had to sign an agreement that she wouldn't publicly say anything negative about her experience at Naughty Dog. Do I think Neil Druckmann forced Amy Hennig out? Yes, I do. After Amy Hennig left, Neil Druckmann and this guy, Bruce Straley, took over Uncharted 4 on one condition, that they would have complete creative freedom. They then threw out most of what the team had created at that point, saving only a few of the characters and the big areas, which included Scotland and Madagascar. Everything else was Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley's creations. And they suck. This explains why Madagascar was so enjoyable, because it was salvaged from what Amy Hennig and her team had done, and therefore had less of Neil Druckmann's greasy, overly scripted fingerprints all over it. And yes, Anita Sarkeesian was brought on by Neil Druckmann as a consultant. I'm just going to leave it at that, because even bringing up her name is just inviting a whole mess of controversy that I don't want to dwell on. The only reason I'm bringing it up is because Neil Druckmann's interviews wouldn't shut up about her, and I know that someone is going to remind me in the comments if I don't at least mention it. But now that I have mentioned it, I only want to leave it at that. If someone spams the comment section of this video about Anita Sarkeesian and all the crap that surrounds her, I will delete those comments because I do not want to drag that pointless drama onto my channel. But even without her, this game still sucks. The rest of the game after Madagascar is noticeably lower quality. The island that they created for their pirate utopia is a dense jungle, and it's not even a visually interesting jungle. It looks like every other bland photograph of a jungle, only it has lots of vertical levels. Now then, while I normally love verticality in video games, this might be the worst implementation of verticality in a video game level. Every enemy encounter is in these crowded levels, where everyone is able to hide from you. And these levels make me claustrophobic with just how tight and linear they are. No wonder I forgot about this part of the game. But it gets even worse because of all these scripted events. Take this event when Nathan Drake and his brother Sam are being attacked by Shoreline while they are climbing down a tower. Nathan finds himself on the floor above his brother, and Sam is calling for Nathan to catch up. You may notice that there is a ton of fire on the floor in front of you. So naturally, you wouldn't run straight forward into an inferno, but when I decided to hang off the platform I was on and drop down, the game insta-killed me as if Nathan had somehow fallen to his death. And I have seen Nathan survive longer drops than this in the game before. Instead of letting the player drop down to the stairs below, the game wants you to go in the least logical direction possible and wants you to jump across the burning chasm onto a platform on the other side. What the heck? I know you want players to feel like insane action movie heroes, but this platforming is absurd. But that's not the only awful platforming. Say hello to the rusty nail of Libertalia. The game calls it a piton, even if it has rusted into oblivion, and Nathan Drake does not use it like a real piton. This incarnation of tetanus is meant to be jammed into porous surfaces to act as another handhold. And you know what? It never should have been introduced into the game in the first place. For starters, this mechanic is introduced over halfway through the game, meaning that you need to abandon 5.5 hours of muscle memory in order to progress through the rest of the game. But it doesn't end there, because even this rusty peg is littered with scripting. You are not allowed to progress through the game unless you use this thing. Even when you can see Nathan Drake just hovering over the handhold, This game will not allow you to move forward unless you jam this rusty nail into the spongy rock. And it becomes even more insufferable when other AI companions are around you. Because the other characters don't have their own batons, they are free to climb all over the surfaces that you need to use the rusty spike on. If there is anything that pisses me off while playing a video game, it's when irrelevant and distracting mechanics are forced onto my game experience. But it's just as bad when a game takes away my freedom of choice for no good reason. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the cinematic fights, that's what. At certain points in the game, the player will be forced into these scripted cinematic fights. I hate these encounters for numerous reasons. The biggest problem that I have with these fights is that they deprive you of certain actions that are normally available to players. The game takes away the functions of the circle and X buttons, the buttons that allow you to roll around and jump. This is a problem since there are tutorials in the beginning of the game that tell you that rolling is the way you should avoid damage in fist fights. That's right, in these fights, you are deprived of the option to avoid attacks from your enemies. This is a massive problem while fighting Nadine Ross. Nadine Ross is the head of Shoreline, and the only times you fight her are in these cinematic fight scenes. The thing is, while you have no option other than to swing wildly and take hits, Nadine has the ability to counter attacks in cinematic fights. There is literally no way for you to win these fights. Oh yeah, there's 2 of them, and the only thing you are allowed to do here is to get your butt spanked by the world's most scripted boss fight. There is no way to win. In fact, there isn't even an option to back away because she moves faster than you. Believe me, I tried. These are by far the worst encounters in the game, but you know what sucks? These could have been done well. There are games out there where deriving options can be used effectively because they make players use tools that they normally wouldn't use in order to achieve victory. And you never really win a fight with Nadine, so having a third fight where you can win would be immensely satisfying after losing to her twice before. This also could have had much more satisfying story potential because it would have shown that Nadine was in fact an antagonist that mattered to the story, and defeating her after constant losses would have been a satisfying story. But nope, instead we got the Rafe fight, and good grief, could it be any more stupid? The final cinematic fight at the very end of the game is a fight with Rafe. You're in the ship of Captain Avery, and the treasure you have been hunting for so long is scattered all around you. After Nadine locks Rafe and the Drake brothers in the room, Rafe is so mad that he grabs a sword off a pirate corpse and then... Wait a second. Is that a tutorial I'm seeing here? Yes, it is. For some reason, the final fight of the game, the fight that should be testing all of your skills you have gathered throughout your adventure, is suddenly giving you a new combat system for you to learn at the last second. Why? Who thought having this in the game would be a good idea? Oh, that's right, it's Neil Druckmann. Well, at least you can block attacks with this system, unlike other fights. However, it still results in button mashing and QuickTime events to try and be as cinematic as possible. Because of all this, the crazy scripted events, the awful cinematic fights, and the obnoxious level design, I keep wishing that I was watching this game instead of playing it. In fact, I know that this is the best way to experience this game because that's how my little sister experienced it. We were both sitting in front of the TV where I was playing Uncharted 4 and she was just sitting there, curled up in her blanket, watching the cinematic game. And despite how tired I was getting and how many times I politely asked if we could stop, she just wanted me to keep playing Uncharted 4 because she was having a blast. And that's really all I can say about this game. I have more fun watching someone else play this game than I do playing it myself. And that might be the worst thing I can say about a video game. Now then, while this might sound awful for the Uncharted video games, this is great news for the Uncharted movie that will be coming out soon. These games already are known for having action movie qualities to them, and the scripted events further make them more like movies than games. Because of their overly cinematic nature, the Uncharted series and Naughty Dog games in general are perfect for film adaptations. You will often hear how a movie adapted from a video game won't feel like the game that they are adapting. Games are normally an interactive medium where you can take it at your own pace. However, because of Uncharted's cinematic nature, the movie is already at a massive advantage for making a movie. For one of the first times in a long time, the Uncharted movie has greater promise to capture the spirit of the games because the games are already doing everything in their power to be movies. I also have learned enough about the games that Neil Druckmann makes that I know I never want to touch any of them ever again. Yes, that means The Last of Us and that stupid Legacy of Thieves collection. Besides, watching the prestige of Naughty Dog collapse following The Last of Us Part 2 has been more entertaining than any story that Neil Druckmann could provide me with. But while I have now sworn to never play games that Neil Druckmann has made, that doesn't mean all Naughty Dog games. I am interested in playing the first 3 Uncharted games directed by Amy Hennig, because the Scotland, and especially Madagascar levels, are the most enjoyable and memorable parts of the game. And I'm kind of curious about the other games Amy Hennig made while at Naughty Dog because of how good those levels are. Anyway, that's my video, and there are half a dozen other games that I want to be playing right now, so I'm gonna go do that. And holy crap, I can tell by the length of my script that this is going to be a long video, so I'm going to shorten it by cutting down on the outro. Anyways, thanks for checking out this video, have a nice day, and I'll see you some other time. Bye.